I don't know if you guys know, but this is the first episode of the second season of Journeys with Kai. I'm joined by Ariana Fowler and JoAdel Adeola. Sorry if I messed up your last name.
It's all good. No, you actually got it right.
All right, it was lucky. Also known as JoAdel, as you can see on the Zoom little name in the lower left corner. But super excited to have both of these guests. I'll just introduce how I met both of y'all, and then I can let you guys do, a quick introduction, sort of like, not elevator pitch, but, what you guys are about and what you guys are doing now. So first, I met JoAdel through this annual conference by the Turner Family Center, which is hosted at the Vanderbilt School of Management, Owen School of Management. Basically, it was a social entrepreneurship summit, I believe they called it. JoAdel was there with his company that he'll talk about later, Fathom PBC, and I was just there as a guest. So as like a Vanderbilt alumnus living in Nashville, I was able to get free entry, and if there's free entry to something cool, I will try to be there. And so just by fortune, there was someone, or serendipity, there was someone that was interning at JoAdel's company at the time that was in one of my classes when I was an undergrad. And I told him what I was about, told him I was very interested in education. He said, hey, you should meet JoAdel, the founder of this company I'm interning for. And obviously there's some steps after that, but that's how we initially met. And very glad I was able to meet him and connect with Fathom and all the great people over there. And then I met Ariana, not directly. So she was, I believe, 1 or 2 years ahead of me. I was class of 2018. What about you, Ariana?
17, so just one.
17? Just one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But she was definitely a big name on campus, mostly, or as I knew it through student government. She was a president. So definitely, yeah, saw all the campaigning, all of the, social media campaigns. Yeah, all the spam. All the stuff you mark as read in your email.
Yeah.
But, so that's how I first knew her name, and then I connected with her on LinkedIn. I think we have, some of the most mutual connections I've ever seen. We have, over 1,000 mutual connections on LinkedIn, which is insane. But I was connected with her because her work history and her education history sounded super interesting, and had a quick chat with her earlier this year, and it just went really well. I think she's doing great things and is going to continue to do great things. And so, yeah, that's how I met both of y'all. Do one of you want to start about, more of your personal and professional past?
Ariana, you first.
Okay. So, yeah, I originally from Texas, went to Vanderbilt, and there studied international development and global health. Have always had a desire to work in spaces that, help people. I had a lot of people help me along my way, and kind of the only thing that feels natural and right is just to kind of continue to pay it forward. But that looked like a lot of different things. So what I did immediately after college was I worked at a blockchain technology company. And, through the lens of technology can change the world, et cetera. Now, after 4 years of being in the crypto space, now I'm working in philanthropy. I work at the Audacious Project, which is TED, TED Talk TED, their big initiative to fund folks that are trying to solve the world's biggest problems. So still trying to change the world, but less so on the tech front. And yeah, based in New York. And I don't know, anything else you want me to add?
No, yeah, that was great. I'm sure we'll dive into different pieces more later, but that was perfect. Cool. Thank you.
Okay.
Awesome. So, how do I even tell mine? This is just a vision that I had, but essentially my background is in small business, entrepreneurship. It really starts with my parents. They were business owners, and I just grew up in it. So just kind of using that as I went. But essentially, I caught an idea for a way I saw the world working in the future. And basically, it was just it was centered around the idea of like young people using technology to solve problems that they cared about, and then the technology enhancing like their quality of life as a result of them solving those problems. There's a lot of like crazy stuff that was in there. You know, when I caught that idea, I told you about it. I'll spare everybody that. But essentially, the first person who really could kind of process like what I was trying to like communicate at the early phases was Julie Dunlap, my co-founder, who's also a Vanderbilt alumni. And I think one of the pivotal things that she did was, at the time she was studying molecular biology, so like science background heavy. She was like, we need to, you know, create a theoretical framework for this, and just like make it into something. And the original hypothesis in 2014 was, if there was a way to distribute problem solving as a skill and a tool set, particularly to young people, could we open up the bottleneck of solving socially complex problems? And there's like a lot of stuff in between there, but essentially it's led us up into now where essentially we're looking at blockchain technology for a unique use case in like skills, documentation, and verification for workforce development and education.
Awesome.
I hope that kind of answered my background. I also founded a company called Fathom, which we do all of that under. I forgot that part.
No, yeah, it's all good. I kind of like leaned into it a little bit in the intro as well. But I think that's probably a good place to start, and a connection I definitely saw when I was thinking about matching up you guys for this podcast, was the very interesting like use cases for blockchain application. Because obviously, sort of like general public, especially if they just watch the news, like a lot of the flashier blockchain applications are just in like cryptocurrencies. So obviously, there's like Bitcoin was like one of the early ones, and then there's Ethereum, which is actually a little bit more unique than other of the cryptocurrencies. And then Dogecoin, you know, all these meme coins. But something that was like really interesting, I also watched Ariana gave a talk to like Consensus, and it was like published on, you know, YouTube and whatnot, and so I watched that, and I really like that you made the distinction, you know, between blockchain applications and just, you know, cryptocurrency. So could you guys go a little bit more in depth in where you see like a lot of sort of untapped potential for the blockchain technology? And yeah, either one can, you know, go ahead.
You can take this one since you're currently working on it. I'm a vet, so I want to hear what you think first.
Okay. Man, I don't want to sound too crazy. So, personally for me, I think blockchain technologies in and of itself represents a new paradigm. You hear this stuff, it represents a new paradigm, but what really do we mean when we say a new paradigm? For me, it's like a new dimension of untapped value, right? So when we think about Bitcoin as a new digital asset class, that means that it represents a new dimension of value. So how that measures out, we're yet to know, right? So for us, or just like looking at where blockchain goes in the future, I think it'll be integrated into like all things in some shape, form, or fashion, just because of the immutability. It'll allow us to create worlds and experiences that were once considered make-believe or that's not really real. It'll allow us to like make those things, at least like I tell you, exist. You don't have to believe in it. You don't have to call it real, but it exists. There's proof that it exists, right? So that, again, represents a new dimension of value. For us, we see blockchain technology being used for, like I said, for us, we want to use it to tokenize talent. You know, when we look at the labor market, just kind of like how DeFi was looked at, or how DeFi looks at traditional financial markets, in the sense that there's a lot of untapped potential, a lot of unbanked people, things like that. We look at the labor market in a very similar way. There's a lot of undocumented skills. There's a lot of unprovable talent. And that's what we're looking at tapping into, you know, like say traditional learners, traditional, non-traditional learners. So for us, it's how can we use blockchain technology to tap into new dimensions of talent use cases, and then potentially create a, you know, cryptocurrency backed by talent itself.
Awesome. Love that. No, that was definitely added some more layers to, you know, blockchain that I think in general people are not like, aware of that.
And that's just like I said, you know, there's a lot of directions it can go.
Yeah. No, yeah, definitely. I think you touch on like several key points, and like just like sort of like the decentralization and sort of transparency of having a ledger is like two, you know, properties of blockchain technology that can be like widely used in, you know, different industries and different applications, just like you said. Okay, now we can hear from the vet. What do you think about this, Ariana?
No, I mean, I think there's exponential use cases for the technology. I think, yeah, asking what it's more like what use cases I think are maybe like most pressing, or like obviously like there's been, you know, crazy evolutions and trends and like what people are using it for and like what's getting funding. So like right now, you know, it's all NFTs. Before that it was DeFi. Before that it was ICOs. So I think like you can really come up with anything that you want. It's software, so you can come up with anything that you want to do with it. The bigger questions I think are more about like how you actually get people to use it, and you know, how you get people to understand what they're using, if you even want to get people to understand what they're using. Those are kind of the more like meta level questions that I used to ponder a lot. So I don't know if we want to talk about those, or what, you know,
Yeah.
where you want to go.
No, yeah, I think you also mentioned that in your consensus talk. It's like a lot of blockchain, since it's like a lot of software and more like infrastructure almost. It's like you really don't necessarily want the user to be like, oh, I'm using this blockchain application,
Yeah.
right? It might be hosted on the blockchain, and one of my good friends is like a UX designer, right? And so like good design, you don't think about like, oh, how do I go back? How do I go forward? Like, oh, is this in the cloud or is this like just on my phone?
Exactly.
Good design allows the user to not think about those things, so they can really just extract the value from the application.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, what JoAdel said. Like, I do agree that I think a lot of what we'll be using, and I can't really predict a number of years because the markets are always so crazy, but I do think we will shift to like a blockchain based, you know, not society, but like, yeah, the equivalent of like cloud, right? Like everything is cloud based.
Right.
Now it's complicated because like blockchain also uses the cloud, and you have people like, you know, like, oh, I just blanked on the company, but they're basically trying to build like a blockchain based cloud. But yeah, I agree with that, and I think that it just is like now people just view it as like a security protocol, right? Like it's like it's right. More secure. It's a more secure way of structuring your data and your information, and then you also have the people that are saying like, so there's like blockchain is the infrastructure technology, and then there's blockchain as like the political tool or economic tool. And I think that's where you actually do need to have people understand what they're doing and what they're using, because if you're trying to, you know, have people participate in decentralized like governance systems, they're going to have to know what they're doing. You can't just expect them to figure it out or not know what they're doing, because then that kind of refutes the purpose, right? It's like there's a part of blockchain that's like, you know, it just makes things more efficient, and like that's fine, that's back office operations. But when we talk about like, oh, decentralized governance, or now DAOs, like people are starting to talk about DAOs, I think more in the mainstream after NFTs. You kind of have to have people know what they're doing and what they're using, and like how different platforms operate, and like what, you know, different consensus mechanisms are involved, and all those kinds of like nitty gritty details that if you're just building kind of like a basic app may not matter. But when you have systems that are participatory, you actually have to do a lot of education, which I think that is still severely lacking in the space. And I think it's going to continue to be kind of like the Achilles heel until someone figures it out.
That's funny you mentioned participatory, because those are actually, and literally it's the mechanism design, tokenomics, all that stuff. That's actually what I'm most interested in blockchain. But we're actually trying to solve for participatory protocols, right? The idea is that, at least from my perspective, blockchain doesn't need us, right? That's one of the dangers of it, right? It doesn't really need us, and if we don't program it right to work with us, that might be a potential, you know, Skynet kind of situation. But with us, we're looking at again, around skill sets and unique talents, and how do you design these participatory based protocols that the technology itself literally needs your talent in order for it to work, right? So you know, on one side we have like machine computation, then on the other side we have like human production. Those are two different things that we feel like can actually go together when you create smart contracts to enable, you know, solving problems and projects, projects that address issues in ways that, again, with the current way the world is working now, we actually, I think, would be better suited using certain type of protocols to enable our technology to move more efficiently. Also, we are going to get into a data economy. We've been there. Like, all this stuff isn't new. Yeah. We've been there, but I think it's now starting to catch up to mainstream. So it's like safe to talk about it. But data is the money. No, let's just be real. Data is the money, which means you are the money. So if you are the money, then how are you tracking, controlling, managing, optimizing the current which you produce? And I think that's one of the things that I see as a potential use case in blockchain, is to be able to capture your natural current. And if you can look at that as skills and talent and things like that, then we can actually create a world where unique experiences become the currency that we use to build more unique experiences. And I know I'm kind of going way into it, but that's like the beauty in blockchain. It's just like the internet. You know, nobody knows what the internet is. They just know that they use things that sit on top of or embedded into the internet. I think that's like where we are with blockchain. It's a general use case or a general purpose technology that, again, it is infrastructure. It's infrastructure. It's a lot of things. It's just like the internet, but it's about like the ideas that can go into it and can like integrate and use it to build new things. I think that's the real danger we face in looking at it as like a political tool and governance, is we may potentially block out some needed innovations.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, I think regulation, and we see it obviously as internet as a prime example of, you know, when government tries to regulate internet without having like a solid foundation, or even like the big social media companies. You see all these hearings with, you know, Zuckerberg and Sundar Pichai, who probably messed up his name. But you just see there's a big disconnect, and there's sort of like a knowledge gap between, you know, how the government sees technology and how they understand it working and like generating revenue. And so if you have, you know, a governing body that is, you know, sort of a couple steps behind and doesn't really understand it as well as the people actually running the companies, you just see there's people that like actually take huge advantages from the government. Huge tax breaks, huge sort of like monopolization. Definitely see that with Facebook. I mean, all of the acquisitions that you're like, wow, how did they just acquire a huge, you know, player like WhatsApp or Instagram, Oculus, and like the VR AR space. And so I think blockchain is, hopefully, you know, we did learn something from, and the government did learn something about like regulating technology through the internet. This isn't their first time. Yeah, I know, a very optimistic view.
That's I'm like, oh yeah, I share that sentiment.
But then you can also think about, and obviously there's internet, there's like different protocols and different international organizations, you know, made up of companies and different sort of stakeholders that might be more suited to regulate these new technologies, because they're like insiders. They actually have a stake, and there is some advantage for having some cooperation and some anti, you know, monopolization / anti, you know, not corruption, but sort of like feeding off the users of the system. What do you guys think about like sort of the regulation aspect of, you know, blockchain?
Well, just really quick, in our case, I think we're in a really, really fortunate position, whereas we sell our product to the government. So we already had legislation that informs how we build our blockchain infrastructure. That's the Department of Labor. So we sell to workforce scores. Essentially, we sell a service that we sold on paper. We're just turning what was on paper into like protocols, essentially. But it's a workforce development program around career development, talent development, things like that. So for us, having the legislation, the infrastructure, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of interviews with the directors, or at least the customers who are going to purchase this, who were and will purchase the paper versions and the blockchain version, we're in a position where we know exactly what to do, how to do it, why to do it. It's just a matter of timing, right? And kind of getting the protocols right. I will say a couple things to some of the points you made. One, you can use the blockchain to do the exact same things that legacy technology or you know, central whatever are doing, and those attempts are being done right now if you understand how to watch it and see the plays that are being made. So there's a big move to like take essentially blockchain technology and just apply it to legacy infrastructure, right? And that's the first step. We're doing that. A lot of people are doing that. Around the regulation aspect, it's one of those situations where I think there's a natural conflict of interest. People naturally use tools to liberate themselves from constraints. I think the way our government, the way governance within, I'm trying to be like very careful here. You know how this goes, right?
I gave up on that a long time ago.
Man, can I be real? Can I, how real can I be, bro? You know me,
you can be as real as you want, bro.
As real as you want the internet to be real.
Get me in trouble. I'm not a co-founder of a company, man. I'm just...
my customers agree with my philosophy, so it's like I don't have that issue. I'm not like an industry person. I'm building for government with government. No, like certain aspects of governments, like the way our legislation works. The big corporations are funding the legislation, right? The big corporations are trying to prevent the small businesses and people who want to use these same tools to liberate themselves from those constraints that the big corporations are putting on them, right? So there's a conflict of interest in the legislators who fund you and then who votes for you, right? And I don't want to get into like how all that stuff works, but the point that I'm getting to is a lot of times you find that the laws seem to benefit existing corporations as opposed to like emerging corporations' ideas and things like that. So I think that's one of the big challenges we face in looking at this blockchain legislation. Also, on a personal note, I feel that we're just like trying to slide the like IRS in there and see if we can like tax all these transactions from what I do agree is like securities. At the end of the day, I do think a lot of the DeFi projects are basically securities. Like, you know, you go in there to get a profit and you take it out to go do some stuff, right? And there's a fundamental difference in a security and a utility. So again, after that, I think once that legislation comes through, those who were truly using this for a use case, I think your issue may become whether it's looked at as like a commodity at some point. Because that's going to be the next legislation that comes, right? But yeah, I think that's like the big thing is like if your protocol is designed to like gain more yields or just increase like the token, but the token doesn't have any real use case outside of like financial instruments, then yeah, you're going to be regulated. And I mean, you're engaging in what the system like. That's what the financial system was designed to do this stuff. Yeah, so it's like you're doing it, so you should like be taxed for it. You're playing by the play by the game, play by the rules. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, it's funny. The more I get away from the space, the more I like agree with that sentiment. It's funny. I think like when I first started, there's like kind of this like crypto-anarchist core and like tendency in the space that I feel like has just evaporated, in my opinion, sadly. I don't think it's evaporated. It's there. It's just been what's it?
Diminished?
Not even diminished. Yeah, I'm just like, it's just been shouted out, right? Or like pushed out, right? Like, they don't scream as loud and they're not as flashy, and they're not promising to make you a millionaire. And like, it's way easier for people, right, to be like, yeah, come get rich using this, as opposed to like, let's fundamentally redesign how like our society operates. Most people actually don't want to do that work and don't want to like think about like what that entails. So then they're like, fuck it, I'll just like buy a picture of, a fucking sketch of a monkey, and then like that's fine.
A neon cat,
yeah, I'm just like, okay, cool. It's just like you're doing really the like actually like I have a lot of critiques on DeFi. Like I think one of my best friends works in DeFi, and she actually runs an organization called SheFi, and she's all about like empowering women using crypto, and like she has seen real kind of material improvements in like women's financial like education and access like to building wealth. And I'm like, okay, that's great. But I think there has been a bit of a democratization of like access to wealth, but at the same time, like it's sort of like not, in my opinion, what it was like originally intended to do. Like blockchain technology. Like I always will say, or I always used to say, like go back and read the like Satoshi Nakamoto white paper on Bitcoin, and then come and talk to me. Like if you haven't read the white paper, like I don't want to hear it from you.
Your opinions.
Because because it's just like it's like you worship Bitcoin, but then you're doing like
you're defeating the purpose.
Yeah, you're literally like doing the exact opposite of what like Satoshi wanted, and then you're doing it in the name of Satoshi, and I'm like, this is sacrilegious. But I mean, people are gonna do what they want to do, so I'm having to like let that go. But yeah, I think in terms of regulation, especially when it comes to DeFi, like if people are playing with like huge sums of money and are dealing with really uneducated consumers, like there is a reason why you have to be like like accredited investor, to like invest in a startup, like or like why you like there's a difference between that and then like buying some stocks via like Republic. Like there's a reason those things operate in like different realms, and like the crypto world has really blurred that line, and I think there is an increased need for regulation because people are just getting harmed. And like that probably will come back to bite me in the ass because like maybe in like a year I'm going to be like down, which like I usually am that way, but I feel like I've just seen a lot of people get fucked.
We'll have you back on
really
once
Yeah, exactly. Like I mean, my sentiments change every day. Like I'm fully aware of like the irony and the paradox of my ideas. And I think that's just like thinking about things critically. You notice the holes in your own logic, but
definitely.
I do think for things like DeFi, I do think they need to be regulated. Because it's just and like again, like you were talking about, like what is the security? Like that was the so many conversations came out of the ICO bubble, right? In like 2018, like 2017, 2018, and those things melted away so fast. And the pace of the government is just atrocious. And so that's where I think like it's like regulation is great when it comes from the government. I think in tandem, just like having better fucking leadership of these companies that isn't just capitalist recreation would be great, but that feels like a pipe dream. So like it's like I think I don't know. I think like if like the government won't do it, then you have to like look at the people that are running the companies. But the people that are running the companies, like a lot of them aren't driven by like I would say the OG
philanthropic
ideals. Not even philanthropic, just like
just real shit. They don't care. Like they don't.
Don't
care.
And it's like there's a bigger game to play. So like for example, like DAOs, like which is like a decentralized autonomous organization, which is kind of like a new way of like self-governance, like in a community, like that's really cool, but it takes a lot of time and work, and like people are messy. But like, and when you do things with governance, like you're dealing with people, and like the people that I see running organizations that are focused on that, like have a very different mentality than the people that like are ex-Goldman Sachs that are like, fuck it, I'm just gonna like make a new protocol that like literally is mimicking, but it's like an automatic market maker or automated market maker, whatever the fuck, and like make just like a lot of money. And I'm like, I feel very conflicted about the DeFi space. And because it just is, it's just the Wild West again. And then what happens is like if when the market bottoms out, like you're gonna end up with like just a handful of whales who are gonna again recolonize like Puerto Rico and just buy a bunch of mansions and like evade taxes, and then like the rest of us are just gonna be like, oh no, and like it's like we've seen it before.
How did this happen?
Yeah. But it's like there's so many new people in the space now that they didn't live through that, and they didn't see that, and we don't really have a great like recorded history of it. It's kind of like with anything in history, like and so people are just like, oh my gosh, it's so shiny, and then like I feel like I'm the like Grim Reaper. I just kind of run around and like sprinkle down in the space, just because I do believe in the potential. I just think, you know, it's beautiful how accessible it is. It's beautiful that it's open source. It's beautiful that there's low barriers to entry, but that also means there's like incredibly increased amount of risk that people aren't aware of. It's like false advertising, right? Like people are intentionally not describing the risk because like they just want to make money. And like that is just lowbrow to me. Now they would beg to differ, right? Like you get like you put another person on, like, and we can debate, and we will just live in different universes. But that's my opinion.
No, a lot of that resonates with me. I think that's funny. Like, so I think there's like almost like there's a reason why DeFi came first. There's a reason why like everything always gets introduced as like speculative shit, right? I think this phase that we've been in for the last few years, this speculative phase, has been one to allow the so-called whales and titans of tech to move their money over, get in position, and then better understand the technology so that they can see how it applies to their technology. I think one of the big distractions is looking at blockchain technology as money. That's what I always try to explain to my family and just like friends around me. It's like, you can't see it as money unless you can see yourself as money. That's like that's the thing. Unless you can see yourself as money, that is money, right? And once you kind of understand that, you can see, like, I'll just be honest, for us, we have a business model that basically it's predicated on the idea that as you develop more skills and you use these skills to engage with other people to build projects that solve problems, that is what mints the currency itself. So literally the currency does not get mint unless skills are developed. So as I've been telling my team for years before because we just started like blockchain development this year. As you said, the research is so fundamental. Like, had the vision since 2010, I've been studying blockchain since 2012, but didn't start doing anything until this year, right?
Which is good. That's, in my opinion, how you should kind of do it.
That's a great
we figured out the...
And thinking you're the new Elon.
Yeah,
exactly. All these people are not solving the real problem.
They're not. We figured out the problem we wanted to solve. And like I said, the problem that we wanted to solve is like liberation of mind, body, spirit. And I do, you know, on some like blockchain stuff, we're solving for like human thermodynamics. Like, we can kind of geek out a little bit. Like, we're solving for human thermodynamics. Like I said, your talent represents that current. Like, you generate those skills. Like, the science says that if there's one thing that you don't stop doing while you're here, at least you have the capacity to not stop doing, is learning, right? And learning skills, all that kind of stuff. So for us, it's how do you create an infrastructure that allows me to take my unique skills, the data behind that, and then that becomes the currency that we use to continue building on. Like, I'm 100%, bro, you know me, like, I'm 100% like anti-Silicon Valley, all this stuff. It's not even an anti-Silicon Valley because that is like an illusion. People don't really know how to see through that. Like, they're just running around in circles doing the same thing. Not a single new innovation comes out of like Silicon Valley. What happens is, like you said, there is a business model of like acquisition, and because the tax code incentivizes that, it's actually cheaper to buy her than it is cheaper to keep her. So you see like no money in like R&D, which is where all of our money goes in. Like, we're funded by the National Science Foundation. Like, we're all about R&D. As opposed to like just taking guests, breaking shit fast. Like, all these like philosophies that they have that are like really, really stupid when you step back and look at it. It's like, y'all broke the world, bro. Like, y'all broke so much shit, y'all broke the world. Like, look at the world now. People are like, you know what I mean? Like, all this shit going on with social media and all this stuff. So like, what happens is we have to literally not turn it around, but like build infrastructure that like moves the pendulum back the other way. So like blockchain, you know, spiritual, it was destined, all this kind of stuff, hey, whatever. It's coming at a time where we have to like decentralize a lot of these technologies that basically use the internet in its first iteration to like consolidate activity on the internet. Like we have to like disintegrate that shit now in order to get more value. Otherwise we go to like zero. You know what I mean? Like you can't have only order. Like again, like we said, the chaos must be there. So I don't see blockchain as like money or anything like that. Like if anything, dude, money is over with. Like Bitcoin is here. No, I'm just saying Bitcoin is the only DeFi. What you're going to see is like, you're going to see after the regulation come, all the like DeFi projects that are like been in the background working on Bitcoins, like blockchain, they're going to come up because Bitcoin is going to be the money. Like all these fiat systems, all that shit's going to like fall. You can go study it. It's like, it's out there. It's known now, right? So Bitcoin represents money, right? Digital money or internet money. And that's what everybody's going to use to like interact with like technology. And then what we're trying to solve for is like I wouldn't call it money. I would call it the movement or the interaction, but like the current of people. Like people have been left out of this like equation with blockchain, and I can almost like prove it. We'll say like, yeah, we need to have like investor interest for the small guy. The small guy can't afford to get in Bitcoin in a real way. Like they can't afford to get in crypto in a real meaningful way. This shit is set up for people who already got money.
Yeah.
That like if you didn't already understand stocks and bonds and equities and all of that shit, you can't do DeFi. Like you can't even do it. Like no, honestly, you can't do it. I had to step back and go and read a couple books to like properly orient myself to like actually do the shit. And I was only doing it for like learning sake of like, okay, how does this apply to like what we're doing, right? Yeah. And then you step back, you go and read like The Intelligent Investor, The Innovative Investor, and like the real books on like real investing and stuff, and you realize motherfuckers don't know what they're doing. Like nobody knows what they're doing. Anyone who's like trading and all that stuff, you're just helping. You're helping us make, like the value investor, you're helping us make money, and then you're also helping the technology part, like the CEO or the founder, like have money just there to break shit, right? That's what that's set up for. Like you give us money out of your ignorance so we can break shit out of our ignorance, and the government will like fix that shit at some point when we get a bailout. No, I'm just, bro, like you see the cycle happen every single day, like, or year or whatever. So since we're like getting more real, like blockchain is way beyond what like mainstream media is trying to like present it as. It's so far beyond money. It has more to do with spirituality than it does anything. And my truest like belief. This is like consciousness manifest in a material form because it can do anything, right? Like, and that's why like a lot of people look at it as a part of the final frontier. Once you put that shit with AI, it's like, nope, I don't forget shit now. Like, I remember you. Like, that's what it serves as, like a memory layer for artificial intelligence. So now once the AI can remember all of this shit that you did, you can't just like you know what I mean? Not to like go into that lane, but that's why people see it that way. But I also see it as a way to like level the playing field. Not to like show my hand too much, but it's more revolutionary than a lot of people think. It's for the people. It's not for like corporations and stuff. Like if your end goal with blockchain technology is to make profits, you misunderstood blockchain. Like you fundamentally misunderstood blockchain. Like you have to actually be looking at, how do I no longer have a company? Like you said, the DAO, like that's for us. It's like literally, how do we get to where like, just, you know what I mean? Like, it's because we're trying to get to where it's like solving problems in the form of like challenges is the protocol design in the form of a challenge. So how do you make blockchain so user friendly that I, who don't code and have to just read books to understand this shit, can like go in there and just like create a fun game challenge that serves as like a real smart contract protocol for people to do, right? We're trying to get it to that layer of like everyday usability so that we can tap into like these economies that don't get considered, like the carry economy, the talent economy. You know what I mean? Like there's like so many, like I said, untapped value sources in the world that, again, mothers who prepare kids for school, mothers who, just kind of show you an aspect of it. Like we talk about like education as a cost, but we never consider the cost of preparing a kid for getting to school, like those first 5 years, right? And this is coming from like, I forget which like economics shit this comes from, but Marta and Nas Bomb, I think. But essentially the idea is like, if you took in account for the cost that like mothers did domestically on the house front, washing clothes, doing dishes, cooking food, and all that shit, you would actually like level out the so-called economy. It's just that we don't place value on things that are not financializable, right? We can't turn housework into like labor, like actual a commodity that we can go and like get it invested in, security, all that shit. Like you have to like
food for.
You know what I'm saying? Like corporations can't exploit that yet.
Right.
Like, I'm sure that you have cleaners and stuff, but like it can't be fully exploited because it's still tapping into like stuff that goes beyond capitalism. And again, that's what we're trying to tap into. How can we like grab those like hidden values that like literally bond people together and like move the world that capitalism does not recognize? You know what I mean? Not that I'm like super anti-capitalism, I'm just like anti-private contract labor and profit, like hyper profitization. I think if we took those two things out, then like capitalism could be, made better. But yeah, sorry for the rant.
No, you're good, bro. This is the place to rant for sure, dude.
You know how I feel about these topics, man.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I just really like both of your guys' perspective on it. And it's just something that I always like to carry with me is people's different perspectives, especially on like these, hot button topics, like blockchain and like the internet and like regulation. Because I think, and Ariana mentioned it earlier, even just sort of like an introspective note. It's like, oh yeah, she like, depending on the day, because she's, very critical thinking, and that it applies to not just, technologies and other people, but also her own ideas and her own opinions. And then you're going to see, some changes in opinions and changes of how you, see certain things. And that's why that's one of the great things I get out of this podcast and just conversations in general, is that I get to see how other people see different things. Because I think it's really hard. It's really easy. And I mean, internet definitely, accelerates this. It's really easy to get stuck in these little echo chambers and stuck in these sort of like feedback loops, just in your head of like, oh, I think this, so next time I'm going to think this easier, and next time even easier. And it's just going to get harder and harder to stray away from this pattern of thinking. And it's something I think both of my parents, I'm very fortunate that they encouraged me, to critically think, to ask questions, not be embarrassed if I didn't know the answer. And I think that led me to a place where I can be a little bit more accepting of like, different views, and actually try to, empathize instead of just like sympathize. Oh, that's too bad for you. It's like, oh man, yeah, like if I was in that position, that's like really rough. And that's something on more of like we talked about blockchain like pretty macro, and I'm really glad we did. But yeah, like on more of like the personal or like micro view of just like not blockchain application. Okay, wait, I definitely just got lost in my own thought. Sorry.
Happens.
Blockchain is that way, man.
Yeah. And Ariana will definitely want to talk about like the Audacious Project and like TED and the philanthropy. But just before we, take this, sidestep, JoAdel, like Fathom didn't start out in like workforce development, right? That was more of like not recent thing, but a thing that happened like the last year or two.
No, we didn't start off in blockchain development.
Yeah.
We've always been in workforce dev.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Well, okay, you're right. We didn't know it was called workforce dev. We were just trying to teach like kids how to create a career based on purpose, and then you realize like, why does the government keep paying for this shit? And then you realize like, oh, there's a whole thing set up to like fund this kind of stuff. That's how we found out.
Okay,
should I like tell that story or something, or
yeah, no, yeah. I was just like, because I told Ariana a little bit, about your background. And so when I met you and when I came in, it was, to me, it's like a lot more education focused. And obviously there's like a natural transition, and I wouldn't even call it a pivot really, just like you said, to, workforce development. But yeah, like sort of like the core concepts and like the education courses that you first had like that big contract with Maps or with yeah.
So it was a couple contracts. So
Oh yeah.
So yeah, a lot of people always look at it as like education because they see on paper, but we fail to realize like, bro, you got to learn anything that you do, right? You know what I mean? And the easiest way to get to a young person is in school because that's at least the bottleneck right now. So for us, when we, like I said, when we first started off, the theory was, how do we prepare young people to be architects, or not the theory, but just like the goal was how do we prepare young people to be architects of their destiny, like creating careers that they actually care about, right?
Yeah.
And man, there's like a lot of things we did. The first thing we did was to like prove out the theory of change. It was like at a state Tennessee conference on volunteerism and service learning. We basically created a simulation that demonstrated like what we were trying to get at. And the intervention really is looking at from an institutional and individual level. I'm like, this is all like Julie shit, bro. So like next time have her come explain. Don't let me like run with her shit. But the idea is that every individual is connected in this like simulation that we built. Every individual was connected to an institution. So you had like the student, the lawyer, the doctor, the whatever. And it was this town called Turnip Town, like turnip greens, right?
Okay.
Wordplay, turnip, right?
Turnip.
This is in 2014, bro. This is like around, like it was
y'all were dabbing.
It was like a zone around that time. So the idea was like Turnip Town was this completely sustainable community, and this autonomous like thing was gonna just come to your town and basically, and this is like kind of like from personal experience, but the idea was that like once this this thing, we had a name for it. I don't want to say it on here because it might upset some sponsors and people we all might fuck with. But essentially, once they came to your town, all of those like local businesses and everything that you had going on were going to be like become just extensions of that like entity. And it was like completely self-ran. No human was involved. Again, bro, this was 2014, like super early on it. But the idea was, could we basically created these personas and like had these different characteristics, capabilities, all this different stuff, but we itemized it to like get more at like, how like shit really works, as opposed to like the physics-based economics models where it's like, we want it to be like this and anything that doesn't fit in here is an externality, right? So we wanted to account for that shit. So making it more dynamic. Basically, we itemized all the different like skill sets and things like that. So every round was like unique and different. So you might have been the student in this round. Maybe you like knew some shit. You had friends. You had no money, but you was trying to do this. And the way we like kind of stacked it was you had an individual goal, a institutional goal, and then you had your community goal. And your community goal was basically save your town, right? So you create this dynamic where everybody has this like self-interest, right? So everybody's dished out these cards, and we all know that like the city's about to get fucked up, but I need to get my bread up because if I don't get this project approved by this time, then I'm going to lose my job. And if I don't find somebody to help me study these, whatever, I'm going to get kicked out of school, even though I can code anything. You know what I mean? Like it was all this cascades. Like these pull-push dynamics. So what we were able to show was that our theory, like, distributing problem solving as a skill and a tool set, we were able to show like every project or every group workshop that we did had like different proposals to the same, I was about to say the name, but they're coming to your town to fuck your town up. And basically it was like, that was like the initial theory. 2014 is like, can just like the accumulation of different problems from different places, like get it. And this is based on like a framework that we use from the beginning. It's called participatory action research. And basically it's like an intervention framework where you see the person or the community or the individual that's being intervened upon as the subject matter expert. Whereas like, I don't really include myself in this, but at this point I ain't got no degrees or nothing like that. But we, the so-called experts, we got all the same textbook knowledge, right? We all read the same standardized shit, so we can't really say too much that's different from each other. Hell, we're bound by those rules by like some of our communities. So what PAR allows us to do is to like go into those communities and allow them to give us this like contextual data that is not in like all of the like peer-reviewed shit. So now you have unique data to play with. And that unique data is usually where the solution of the problem is. Can't get to the same shit with the same line of thing. You know, all that kind of stuff. It all applies, right? And that's what's like in our curriculum behind like why this approach works. Like what you see the kids going through is like all this creative problem solving, all this kind of stuff. Like the idea is that we were able to like see that, okay, these people did not have this knowledge in these spaces, but because of this like critical thinking, creative thinking, these exercises, they were able to like ideate like knowledge that like no expert could have came up with because they ain't thinking about. And that's another thing is like we were intentional about adding like the non-traditional elements. So like you had like the loan shark or, you know, the gang members, like all these different elements that are like really here though. Like they're really here. Like some of us have passed through these elements. So we were like, it was like greatly received or whatever. It's like, you know, they told us like we should consider teaching it to kids because the demographics were like government officials, like volunteers, service workers. Like it was like a mix. There's a good mix of like kids, students, stakeholders, educators, that kind of stuff. So the next thing at the time, I'm gonna just speed this up because I don't want to tell the whole thing. But Julie was actually studying curriculum. She was not studying, but she was working with the public health department using like the Sesame. She was like doing curriculum development for early childhood development stuff. And she was just like, we could like create a curriculum for it. So, you know, go figure out what a curriculum is, do some research, and this is like why it's important for like your solution to always be outcome driven, because you don't get locked into a metric, right? Like some people do in certain communities. This metric is what's funded. No, these outcomes are what's funded or what's, you know, whatever. But the idea was, so then we transitioned from a simulation, basically a game that we built on paper because it had like characters and card games, all this like cool stuff. We then basically wrote a curriculum, and the curriculum basically is what you like, where you got involved. And it was it's designed to challenge young people to identify their passions, talents, intrinsic motivations, a community issue that they care about, whether online or offline. And then we introduce entrepreneurial problem solving as a framework where it's not necessarily about the entrepreneurship, but it's about that like multi-dimensional problem solving aspect of entrepreneurship. I found a new way to give you value, right? What's it worth?
Yeah.
We take that as a framework for career development. So now we actually have a methodology for lifelong learning. It's like you have a problem that you're addressing. Here's why you're addressing it. Here's how it's relevant in every stage of your life. Here's what you can be learning, whether it's your concentration in fucking college, whether it's your capstone project in high school, whether it's your apprenticeship for the career shifting. And we didn't intentionally know that was like workforce development. It was just that it applied to the standards and the legislation of workforce development. So kids were actually paid to go through this program. We never knew why in 2017, 2018. We was just like, bro, you trying to like, because I'm going to regular like kids in high school. It's like, you know, regular people, they scared to go to the school and, you know, going there and promote. It's like, bro, give me my shit. We going in there. We finna go into the cafeteria in the belly of the beast. Bro, y'all trying to get paid. Y'all trying to learn the same. Because the science.
You're like Oprah, bro. Look under your seat.
You know, no, I'm saying though, it's like there's a logic to it though. There's a method to the madness. There's science that supports like the drug. Remember, I'm going after non-traditional talent. The people who don't think college is for them, who don't think corporate is for them. But the thing is, you got some unique capabilities and abilities or whatever. And there's science to support that if you can successfully run a criminal organization, that skill set can directly transfer to a Fortune 500 corporation. You know what I'm saying? So for me, it's like, bro, we can intervene at an earlier stage. It's like, we already know what you want. Like, we ain't got to say it. But look, bro, here's how you can take that same skill, get paid in the process while you learning this stuff. Remember, that was like get paid to solve a problem you care about. Remember, like the little marketing stuff we did. So we go into the schools and promote it like that. And then what happens is they didn't understand that they didn't know that they was going to go through like this, you know, this social emotional learning aspect and all of this other super positive self-development, all this other stuff that we've incorporated into the program, which becomes the mechanisms, the protocols, the automated market makers for your project discovery. And instead of like, as opposed to price discovery, project discovery, stuff like that, like we already had all of the fundamentals laid out, but we didn't know what blockchain was at that level. So I think it was once Julie went back to Vanderbilt, we got like, that was when I started working with the Innovation Center at Vanderbilt or whatever. And Dina, Dina, they worked with us. Dina's one of our mentors, business mentors. She basically, they worked with us to apply for the NSF I-Corps program. And once we got in there, bro, it was over. It was over after that. Cause, it was over. It's like once we got into that program, not only were we trained, it was fundamental for me as someone who doesn't. I got a GED, bro. Like I went to high school in Nigeria, so I got some pedigree to my shit. But as far as paperwork, again, as far as the centralized labor market is concerned, I have no proof of what I know other than it, like what I'm telling you right again. What kind of interview is going to allow me to show you that I got some experiences that's like highly valuable. So going through that program, it allowed me, one, to learn the actual science of scaling a business and research and all of that shit. Like they taught us the process. Like if anyone who knows the I-Corps program, you know that you come out with a data-driven, evidence-driven business model. Like anything I tell you about our business is like, I got hundreds and hundreds of interviews and quotes and shit to like back it up. So that was one major part is like, okay, now we know how to do this entrepreneurship shit. Then the second part was we learned that like the data that was being generated from the curriculum that we created was actually the exact data for like education, workforce boards, like all across the board. They've already told us that like your solution is a universal case management solution. So we know again, like once you read the legislation, which I know a lot of people don't. And again, this is why I don't like to like consider us like a traditional startup, because they would run away from legislation or regulation. They would literally run. Like they can't even get invested in with like that shit. Like they can't even get invested in, which is why we're taking the slow, thorough tortoise route of like understanding your research, working with your customer the whole way, building it according to like whatever, and making, you know what I'm saying, all that good stuff. So we learned, okay, this is the data that's needed. Then when we went and like looked at the legislation and how that stuff worked, we learned that, okay, you're engaged in some of the most stringent case management like protocols there are. Because remember, we are the same organization that's being regulated as we are also building the tool for the other thousands and hundreds of thousands of organizations like us. We're talking like Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCAs, like, you know, I ain't gonna even talk about corporate HR and all that stuff. Like we have like some crazy markets that when you talk about talent, bro, it's everybody, like that's everything, right? So again, and the thing is like, but a lot of people understand blockchain. What it does is once you understand one single use case that's like really valuable for your blockchain, you have a universal use case across the board for like some shit you didn't even know existed. So for us, we're exploring the tokenomics of a talent-based economy, right? Where literally the program is funded and subsidized by the government. We get to take the cryptocurrency in places that most people don't, because the currency isn't pegged by the dollar, but it's subsidized by the dollar. You ain't heard of that yet. You ain't heard of those kind of like those kind of dynamics in blockchain where it's like, bro, shit ain't pegged to it, but fuck with it. You get some money on both sides, so you can play in both worlds if you want. So, you know, then that opens up the doors. Like, can our shit become like a discount thing, or, you know, some other kind of stuff like that. So I just wanted to kind of tie that in of like how our theory ties into like these like kind of like, they're not unexplored use cases, I'll say. And why we don't see it as really money, we see it as really like, it's a new social fabric, if you will.
No, that was beautiful. That was like more than I could have ever hoped for. That was perfect.
That was like how you read it all the way up until like today, right? We're like literally building our wallet right now, right? Multi-sig. So
No, thanks. Before we go to like philanthropy, again, thank you, JoAdel, for that like great description. I think that for me at least connected a lot of dots between where you are now and where you were. I should probably reverse that order. It makes more sense that way. But where you were now to where you are now. Woo! Talking's great.
It's all good. It's all good.
Okay.
Blockchain, bro. It's all, you know what I'm saying? Like, future, past, present, all that.
Ariana, did any of that like connect with you before we go and talk about your like Audacious project?
No, I mean, I think it all is amazing, and I need to go do some more research about the company. So afterwards, I'm like, that's really rad. I feel like most startups, like you were saying, when they run from government, I mean, they are not trying to solve, or they don't even know what problem they're trying to solve. They don't actually want to do the work to create like systems level and like systemic change, and then also like have very short-term views. And so I think, everything you're saying, I'm just like, wow, haven't heard about a company doing that in a long time. So
we're not online though. That's like one of the things. Like we believe in this peer-to-peer stuff. We're like rebuilding our website. Where like everything is only going to be accessible to our website. Like I don't have anything outside of LinkedIn. It's like
okay.
We stand by this stuff. Like if it wasn't for like workforce boards and customers, I wouldn't even have a LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like we know what they're doing, and we're building a solution for it. The more pressure we put on ourselves, or at least me, I put on myself, the more. All right, you got to make it work now. It's like how you
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've definitely fallen in that trap of putting too much pressure on myself. That's not necessarily like, just unnecessary. But yeah, Ariana, I really don't know too much about, the Audacious Project. I read, the little blurb on LinkedIn and checked out their site. And it seemed super interesting. Obviously, like it's a big scope, right? It's just like, the most important problems, and we're taking like, these bold people applying solutions to them. It's like, okay, sounds great, but could you give us some more insight, as much as you can, into Audacious Project, what they're trying to do, and your specific role?
Sure. Yeah. So it's only about 3 years old in like its current existence as like the Audacious Project. Before that, there was a thing called TED Prize, which was they would give like one prize a year to like a really amazing social entrepreneur, and prize meaning just like a lot of money. To like one social entrepreneur, so like NGOs that were tackling these big issues, and then they expanded it to now what is Audacious Project, and so now we fund 10 projects a year, and so it's when I say I said prize model earlier, that basically is there's a contest, and we pick 10, and I'm still kind of learning the like how we pick. I haven't been a part of that yet. I've only been on the team for 2 months, but like we pick 10, and then we work with them. So like TED itself or Audacious doesn't hold the money. We have a network of, some of the world's richest people, and we're kind of like a new approach to philanthropy. So like they have, a lot of these people have family offices, or they've previously given money to like other big philanthropies, and now they're giving us their money, and like we are doing the work of like sourcing and managing the portfolio of projects, and we're kind of betting that like we can maybe do philanthropy different or better. Also, if you hear an alarm, I did just order food, so I think my doorbell might ring. I think I saw the guy come. Yeah, there it is. So what we do really, so like TED doesn't give out the money. We kind of, sorry, I don't know why it rings so many times. TED doesn't give out the money. Thank you so much. But what it does is, again, manage that portfolio of organizations. Right now we have 29. We're going to get, another 10 funded this year, hopefully. So we don't guarantee the funding. The way it works is interesting is there's like an event in September that all the wealthy people go to and hang out and just schmooze and mingle. And then they decide if they want to, not even, it's like a dinner. It's like, we're chill. They used to go to like, it's funny. It's it's kind of like the charity water gala where they like all get together and then just throw out how much money they want to give, and that's kind of what this is like. Which is it's just philanthropy is weird. It's a weird world. Like any world dealing with like extreme amounts of wealth is strange. For sure. But they kind of get to decide like, do they want to fund the project that we are proposing to them? Most of them do get funded, and then what we do is support them through the process. And like these organizations they're going from, staffs and teams of maybe like a hand, and it depends. Some of them are going from like staffs and teams of like, 5 to 10 people to then getting $100 million over 5-year grant.
Oh my
and
gosh.
they have, it's like, we're moving a lot. In 3 years, we've moved $2 billion.
Holy cow.
To 29 organizations. Yeah. So like
that's amazing.
Massive amounts of money, crazy amounts of like systems change in terms of like the organizations themselves, but they are also solving these like world changing issues. And we're pretty much issue agnostic. So like we have a guy who's figuring out how to talk to whales, and like we have a guy who and then like we have a project that's figuring out how to design new like nanoproteins for vaccines. And then but then we have people that are trying to get every girl in India who's not in school enrolled in school. And then, people are doing like digital education and then working on police equity. So like we span the whole kind of gamut of issues. But it's just the issues have to be these big problems that individual philanthropies and grants don't fix. So our whole pitch is like, well, we bring together, I mean, that's why it's called Audacious, right? Audacious ideas, Audacious projects. It's like, these are really risky, big challenges, but there also need to be, you know, approached again from like a 5-year, which usually 5 years isn't even enough to solve these problems, that they should be more time. And like $100 million is really a drop in the bucket for what it may take to like, you know, do the work that needs to get done.
Right.
But yeah, so that's Audacious. And then what I do within that, so I'm on the team called Portfolio Impact. And so it's basically supporting the organizations after they get funding. So we're building out the team. The team right now, or like when I first started, was only like 5 people. And now we're scaling to, I think we're going to be like 8 or 9. And so there isn't really an infrastructure for how we support the organizations. Like at this rate, it's just kind of, in the past, it's been like, okay, great, here's like all your money, now go keep working. And then like we have to like flip and start the next cycle of picking projects and stuff. But now that we're adding more people, such as myself, my job right now really is to design what does it mean to like be an audacious project, and like what kind of support do you get from TED, from our donors. So like really kind of creating an
fundamental
entirely new
stuff.
No, building it out basically is pretty crazy when I think about it like that. But yeah,
it's its own audacious project.
No, seriously. It's like, you know, a consensus we would say like building the plane as we're flying it, and like we're doing the same thing here, where it's like, we're trying to change how philanthropy works, but also we're doing it like live, and like, you know, we're winging it, but so far so good.
No, from what I saw like on your site, it looked very, very polished.
That's the TED side. You know, that's
okay.
Well, the thing is, like, it is like, I think it technically is a separate legal entity, but it is housed under TED, and so like we do get to use all of the TED resources and talent, which TED is basically, it's a nonprofit, but it's a media organization. And so like we have designers, you know, videographers, like it's very heavy on image and presentation, like that. There's a reason why TED has the brand that it does. And so the cool thing is that we, like, that's kind of our value out of these projects, is we're like, like a lot of them do end up giving TED Talks, and then they get to like have this like, you know, global audience. And so like our pitch is like, we'll help you get money, we'll help you connect to these like, you know, billionaires, and then also we'll, you know, kind of use whatever we have in our arsenal to make sure that you succeed, which a lot of that is comms and storytelling, and things like that. So
awesome.
Can I ask a quick question, Kai?
Sure.
Definitely. What's the most, like, I guess, audacious project that you've like seen since you've been there?
I really like the whale one. I really do. It's called Project SETI, CETI. And basically there's this like brilliant guy named David Gruber who is trying to use like machine learning and AI to recognize like whale speech patterns. And then like the whole like long-term thing is like, if we can communicate with like animals, can we communicate with like extraterrestrials, and like how do we have a more kind of like, honestly, like harmonious like coexistence with like our surroundings. But then he also is doing a lot of work, like his main research is on the island of like Dominica. And he's doing a lot of work with like local communities to like, because it ties obviously into like ocean conservation and, you know, empowering local communities to kind of, you know, deal with things like climate change and like tourism and all this different stuff. And like, because you can't really, there's so many layers, right? It's like you want to talk to whales, but then also like you have to kind of save the whales. You have to be aware of like the effects of climate change, but then also like you realize that in a lot of these like coastal communities, like they're not equipped to do like adequate conservation. And so there's just like a lot of layers, I think, in the work that he's doing. And it's like, I mean, it's right now Project SETI is literally just him. Like it's one guy. No, he has like a board. But I think like, so I think that that's really audacious, because it's just, it sounds kooky and out there, but then once you start kind of poking around, it actually doesn't seem that crazy. David Gruber, look him up. He's really rad. He's brilliant. He's based in New York, and is also just a really nice guy, which I enjoy working with nice people. So
it's okay. No. No, once you said like talking to whales, the immediate first thing I thought of was like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and like
Oh, I've never seen it.
okay. They also have a book, and I think I've read the first two maybe. I don't know if I finished
Okay.
Restaurant at the End of the Universe, but there's this scene, so I won't go like too deep into it, but I highly recommend, and super up my alley, by Douglas Adams. But they have this like what do they call it? Like improbability drive. And it's like attached to the ship, and like when you press the button for the probability drive, it like goes through all the possible like probabilities, and then it ends up at one, but it like cycles through them. So like while you're on board, you're just like, oh, one time you're yarn, and then like another time like it's just like really like kind of trippy stuff, but then it'll eventually stabilize. And then there was this one time like after they pressed the probability drive, there was a bowl there was petunias in like a flower pot that randomly popped up, and a blue whale that randomly popped up. And they're like, we're speculating here, but what most likely went through, you know, the the blue whale's mind was like, oh, where am I? It's like, what is this thing flowing all around me? You know what, I think I'm gonna call it wind. You're like, what's this brown thing approaching me very fast? It's really big. I need like a big word for it, like something like brown ground. I'll call it ground. And then it like impacts and then explodes. And that was the end. and then like they also speculated what was in like the flower pot with the petunias. And then what they speculated what it was thinking was like, oh no, not again. So yeah, that's just like one small excerpt. But that's like the immediate thing, not too relevant to SETI or David Gruber, you said?
Yeah, GRUBER. Yeah.
Okay. No, I'll definitely. That sounds super interesting. I'll definitely have to look into that.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's like honestly too one of the, I think the most like positive. I think that a lot of like our projects are split. You know, of course, like any work is going to be either like proactive or reactive in terms of problem solving. So it's like either you're trying to like for like climate change, for example, you're either trying to like mitigate it and like deal with like the effects of it, or you're creating solutions that are, you know, like you know, new. Yeah. And so I think like this, we have a lot of things in our portfolio that are, you know, like, oh, getting girls into school. Okay. Like that, you know, is good and important. Obviously, like, I'm not saying that that's not important, but it feels almost like fundamental and like basic, right? Or like, you know, providing like, like Maslow's hierarchy, like basic things. And that can be sad a lot of times. Like, and like a lot of the work can be very sad and very heavy when you're like reading these stats and you're just like, God, like humans are fucked. But then you see like someone trying to figure out how like to speak to whales, and you're like, okay, maybe we're cool. Like maybe we're not terrible. Like maybe there's like some redemptive qualities. So.
Yeah, there's a coworker. And sorry, JoAdel, if you want to say anything, go ahead too. This is like
no, you're cool. I'm
super open.
I'm just vibing with you.
Vibing. All right, cool. A coworker talked to me recently during a happy hour, and the context why he brought it up was more about like sort of like the political divide, and we're not going to go too far into that way, but just like he saw there's like a lack of compassion and critical thinking, and he's like, you know, and you know, this is like an older gentleman, not old by any standard, but he's, you know, asking this young kid, you know, what advice would you give me for like, you know, when you see the world like this? And he's like, oh, maybe I'm just like old fashioned, but it's like I think people need to be more compassionate. And I'm like, oh nope, I'm totally aligned with you there. And something I've brought up in like multiple, I almost said circles, which is funny because it's like the Confucian idea of concentric circles. And I'm not sure who first told me about it or where I first read about it. But there's idea of like these concentric circles. So you can think of like a target or a stump, whichever, you know, visualization you prefer. But basically at the center of that is you. And so that's who you have the most control over, the most influence. So when we talk about, you know, these, you know, big ideas of compassion and critical thinking, first, you know, it's good to center yourself and realize, you know, where you have room for improvements, where you can sort of exemplify those traits. And then the next concentric circle right around you is like your really close friends and family. So still you have a great impact on them based on your actions and what you say, great influence, and you can really see some like visible direct change. And then after that, it just like slowly grows and grows, right? So then it's like, oh, maybe your acquaintances, maybe like your extended family. And And the idea is, like, it's kind of like grassroots thinking, and I'm not, like, too into the grassroots movement, so I can't explain that one as well. But the basic idea is that there is sort of, like, this, you can call it a butterfly effect, network effect, however you want to, mental model you want to put on it. But that once you sort of realize the control that you have over yourself and how that impacts, the wider communities, it's a really good way to sort of feel like you are making an impact, feel like you are making a difference, without necessarily, maybe solving any of these problems, but you can make these, sort of pockets of, I don't know, positivity. I don't know. Maybe I was like a little bit too rose-colored glasses.
No, there's Sharon Salzberg is I don't know if you ever listened to the On Being podcast, like BEING. It's incredible. It's like it's what reminds me to be optimistic. It's Krista Tippett, and so Sharon Salzberg is like a Buddhist teacher, and she has this a similar thing called like your 3 feet of influence. And I actually have the article linked in my Insta bio because I always am like talking
Nice.
about it, and I always have to like remind myself that like these like, especially for me, I feel like I care like way beyond my 3 feet of influence. And
Right.
so it's like you have to kind of shrink down to like how you can contribute, because problems can feel so big. But then sometimes I actually feel like with people I have conversations where I'm like, I need you to step outside of your like 1 centimeter, like yourself, and like expand to like 3 feet, like just a little bit.
I'm right here.
Yeah. It's like, oh God,
There's a disconnect right here.
yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, I feel like there's like, yeah, that's a whole different kind of conversation and rabbit hole. But yeah, the 3 feet of it's called Your 3 Feet of Influence. It's a blog post, but then she talks about also like on the podcast with Krista.
Oh, that's awesome.
But she's really brilliant. Yeah, but it's exactly what you're talking about. These like, what are your spheres, and like how can you engage in them? And
Right.
yeah, it's yeah, we definitely need a lot more compassion in the world, and also critical thinking. Yeah, it's like both.
Yeah.
Like you can't just like kind of echo chambers. That doesn't solve anything. Whether they're like good echo chambers or bad ones, like,
Right.
No, 100%. I agree with that too. We actually have a formula. It used to be like a marketing pitch for us. Passion plus problem equals purpose. And, the idea is that, once you find a problem you're passionate enough about solving, you've identified a purpose. And it's usually those people who identify their purpose that it's so funny because, we'll say, man, this person is a fucking genius, or like they can do anything. It's like, dude, this is the one thing that I can do in my sleep. Like, and that's like that. Well, that's the facts of it. Like, that's the unique thing about your purpose is your purpose. You don't even have to try. You have to try, like you have to develop it and hone it. And, there's a whole perseverance, but it's something that was already within you. And because it's so unique to you, it's like your gift, your talent that you're to give to the world. No one else can give it to the world. And that's how you break through the first, second, third, fifth, and infinite degrees of like separation, is that only this, if you could go into self and find the thing that only you could do, everyone has to marvel at it because they can't do it. Like that's like the thing that we like really hone in with like our change agents, like theory, is that find your purpose, because once you find your purpose, can't nobody stop you. Like it's bro, the stories I used to tell you about being called crazy over this shit, going homeless, and all the things that like started when you saw a world based on like shit that you never was exposed to. Again, all you got to do is like take the leap of faith, and what you find is like once you get over that first hurdle, you really get into like flow and all of this, all this like all that stuff that they talk about. We teach it as well, but like for us, it's your purpose. Your purpose is like that's the cheat code.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I love it. I mean, it's really, and you've talked to me about this, JoAdel, too, but like really once you find your purpose and you start making steps in that direction, like you don't even have to like search for opportunities. They like come to you. You make these connections, you're having conversations that just like build off each other. That's why for me sometimes it's hard, like when I'm looking back, I was like, wait, how did this come about? And it's just like a series of interactions between people, and it's just like a continually like building effort. And this podcast is sort of like an offshoot of that for sure. it started with me, you know, interacting with people in college. Like, whoa, you have like some like really interesting experience, interesting like perspectives and knowledge that I wouldn't be exposed to otherwise. I want to seek out more of that. And then I'd try to like formalize it a little bit in this podcast, you know, connect people that I think are like have really good synergy, and then also sort of like just disperse, you know, their knowledge. So it's not just me listening to it. So hopefully other people are also having, you know, some takeaways as well, and can find their own thing. So it's not like I don't think everyone should just have a podcast about, you know, what they're passionate about. But it's like I think people should try to find stuff in whatever realm, professional, personal, social, whatever, where they can feel like they have, you know, passion and purpose and continue down that road. Because especially like growing up, and we can talk about this a little bit, like, and I'm wearing like a Questbridge shirt. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that like scholarship organization. But it's when it was initially conceived, it was for like first gen low income students for like higher education. It was started by this like two people from Stanford, and that was like the first partner school, and now they have like 30 plus partner schools. It's the only reason I went to Vanderbilt. It's the only reason, you know, I felt like I could like graduate with no loans, and I could really like try to get the most out of it. And I wasn't like a stereotypical Questbridge. I wasn't first gen. Both my parents went to college. Neither of them are currently using their degrees in their profession. And they also split up, so there was some like financial burdens that I definitely resonated with in like Questbridge and other Questbridge alumnus and like current members. But like I wasn't able to, you know, have these, you know, grand thoughts and have these like discussions that I'm having with you and outside of the podcast, like while I was in school, because it's like I really thank my parents for really sort of like not making me feel like I grew up without, you know, a lot of financial burdens, but for sure they definitely felt, you know, the financial burden with a kid or without a kid. They definitely had, you know, their own struggles, and I thank them for like trying to, you know, take that burden on themselves, so that I would, you know, can just focus on school, focus on like friends, focus on, you know, the fun stuff that you want to as a kid. And my dad, I definitely thank for giving me a lot of structure in my life, which you really need as a kid, so that you can like, you know, grow within that structure and have, you know, some consistency. So, and it's like almost kind of related to like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but just more like sort of like what you think about and how you perceive it. Because growing up, it's like really kind of automated, and it is really kind of like, oh, the teacher says this, okay, I take that as fact, like as, you know, Bible, as dogma almost. But then as you grow up, you start to, you know, critically analyze it, start to come up with more unique perspectives and ideas, and I think it's based partly off, you know, a more diversification of your experiences. And that's something I, you know, I hope to continue on to this journey, and then also hope, you know, share what I've learned throughout it as well.
Totally.
Yeah. Sorry, that was a little tangent, but that was what I had to say about that.
Yeah, no, I think enough people don't talk, I think, about like I like to be meta, and I think I've been getting annoyed lately because people are like, you just think about things so much, and I'm like, well, what the fuck are you thinking about? And it's like it's good, you should be thinking about those things, otherwise like who's doing the thinking for you? And like if you want someone else to think for you, that's fine, but I feel like you actually don't in most cases. It just takes a lot of time and energy to think critically, but I do think it is a better, like, even I would say for both of us, or all three of us, like doing stuff that makes us happy and like passionate, like I feel like, at least in my life, people have been like, wow, you're so brave, how did you do it? I could never. Oh my gosh, it's so insane. And it's like, you can, but you just have to actually know what you like and what you don't like, and that takes thinking. And then like you were saying, like once you kind of know what your passion is and what your purpose is, like those things do come to you, like, but you have to have an idea of what that is. You know, I don't want to be like woo woo, be like manifest it, but like it's, you know, I think you do have to have an idea, otherwise, you know, then like we were talking about this, you know, a bit, Kai, but like, you know, I said no to things in college. I graduated, you know, Vanderbilt without a job, which is like so fucking sacrilegious, right? Especially as like student body president, but I just like, it didn't feel right. It didn't feel aligned. And then like, I would have not, if I would have said yes to things that didn't feel right, then I wouldn't have done any of the things that I'm doing now, or like have done. And like, yeah, it's scary, but it usually does end up being worth it. And that's a lot of the stuff that I would talk about too, with like, and a lot of like the mentorship stuff, or even talking to like, you know, Vandy undergrads and stuff. And that's kind of one of the things I try to talk about too as president. I just was like, do what you want to do. Like it's scary. Like I've had so many undergrads or like, you know, student, like people that are like recent alumni, like email me or LinkedIn message me, and they're like, how did you do like all the things that you're doing? And like, I'm so scared. And I'm like, you can do it. Like you just have to, but it takes time. And, but you also like you're saying, your dad provided you the structure, your family provided you the structure to like think. And a lot of parents actually don't do that, which again, different conversation for a different time. But yeah.
No, it's if I could say a couple of things to that. Just one, the idea of like thinking. It's funny. So like, I tend to like, this gets me in trouble sometimes, but I tend to like look at the world through like the lens of like basically physics and philosophy, right? And from a physics perspective, when you're thinking, you're putting forth questions, right, to the universe, questions. But from a like alchemical perspective, it's a quest for ions. And we all know that, like, at least if we have like understanding of chemistry, we know that like the ionizing state is like where the magic happens. That's where shit changes and mixes, and that's where synchronicity happens in terms of the universe. That's how you go from like, you know, it happens like, oh, I'm going to get a new car. And you start seeing the very car that you was thinking about everywhere you go, right? That quest that you put out into the universe has now ionized, you know, the ionosphere, whatever you want to call it, however you want to look at it, but it basically has conformed to your quest. And I think one of the big issues is a lot of people aren't putting forth a question to the universe. They're just taking shit as fact, as law, right? Like, we can't do this because that, we shouldn't, we did it. And it's like, did you ever even question it? Because if you did, some kind of answers, like, you know, so like, I think like that's one of the first steps of like into critical thinking is like questioning shit. And that's like, that does take courage. Like that really takes courage. I'll use like an example for me. You know, I was taking classes at Nashville State. Basically, I was supposed to be transferring to MTSU, music production. I was going to start a business, all this kind of stuff. But then this like fucking vision happened. And it went from like, oh, you're in school for like music production and business to now randomly you're switching your major to like sociology and then like philosophy and then like all these like back and forth. And it got to the point where it's just like, bro, you can't continue doing this. These grades don't carry over for this track. So really you don't have grades. So I ended up leaving with like a 0.6 GPA. And again, back to the courage to like follow that quest that you put forth for yourself. I remember like telling myself internally, as well as like Julie telling me like, how many more semesters you gonna waste? Because I was really just going to school to like take subjects about shit I was curious about. It wasn't even about a major for me anymore. And it was when I told myself like, okay, you're gonna pursue this like full on. You're gonna leave school and all that stuff. You know, parents like wasn't fucking with me for a while. Just like, you what? Like they all the way in Nigeria. Like, you what? Like, you know, nah, you ain't doing that. So that whole thing. The other thing that I wanted to touch on was, it was questioning, critical thinking. There was, I forget it. I lost my train of thought. Like, it was another point that I wanted to add to like what you were talking about, but critical thinking will suffice.
No, yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I remember you mentioning that, and then you also mentioned like past passions, like the passing of ions. You know, you're sharing your,
yeah.
You're sharing your energy and your, you know. And one thing that like a lot of people talk about too recently, and probably far away, but I'm more knowledgeable of it more recently, is like authenticity and like whatever the noun form of genuine. We'll go with authenticity. But I think that's something that I've really, you know, tried to lean into. And that's another thing that, you know, it's easy to say, but it's a lot harder to practice. And you have to really understand yourself and what you like and what you don't, and like what you gravitate towards, to really be authentic. And it can grow, you know, it can grow as you grow, obviously. And I think that's something, when you meet someone that's like authentic, it's like, it's so effortless. It's like, oh yeah, they're just being them. And
I was just about to say, bro, that's actually the easiest thing to do, is just be your fucking self. That should, I think, again, because people are allowing the world to tell them, it's like, bro, come on, man. Be who you are. Like, come as you are.
No, yeah, definitely.
But again, just really quick,
Yeah.
In order to be who you are in a world of people who are faking who they are, that means that the thing that's carrying you has to be something unique to you. Otherwise, you're going to have to conform at some point in order to keep the current flowing, to keep the job, to keep the followers,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So
you have to play with the system rules a little bit.
Yeah, well, your purpose has to cut through it, because once it
Oh,
does, either you don't need the system or the system needs you.
Okay.
You found a way to build a product that the government will pay you to figure out how to build it. They'll buy it from you, and it's prototype. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
As opposed to like, we're gonna do fucking what's everybody doing now? Clubhouse shit. We're gonna do like chats. Yeah, we're gonna do stories and stuff. It's like, do something unique to your audience. Like, there was some activity that was unique to that platform that now you've like herded it to a whole nother, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, you see that in big tech all the time. Everyone's copying someone else's thing.
Because they're not authentic.
Yeah. It's like, oh, Snap had, a story that disappeared, once a day. It's like, okay, Instagram, okay, I'll start doing that. And then TikTok's like the latest one. Like, every social media platform, it seems like, has some sort of like TikTok type functionality. Like YouTube has their Reels, I think they call it. And then Facebook also has like their video watching, which is also a very similar mechanic. Instagram has Reels. YouTube is Shorts. Instagram Reels, but it's just like, yeah, it just seems like an easy, like, quick money cash grab, copy features, get users to, divert their attention from one platform to another, without really sort of like thinking about like, why do we want our users to have this feature? How is it being used? And just taking a more like intentional approach, really.
Exactly.
So yeah, and I don't want to keep you guys too long. I really appreciate it. I know we started a little bit late, which is completely fine with me. But I think we can start to wrap up and do sort of like, closing notes and thoughts. So yeah, when I was thinking about closing notes, I think that there's like a common, people like, when you're a mentor or, formal or informal, a lot of people ask like, what's the one thing you would have told your younger self? Which I think is fine. I think it's good, that prompt is solid. But I think given the backgrounds of my two co-guests, I think
I was gonna say, do what you're doing.
a more fitting question might be like, what is some like traditional or common advice you received when you were younger that you're like, oh, that doesn't really apply to me, or that doesn't really like pan out, or isn't as valuable as like it was made out to be?
Oh, that's a real. I've never been asked that question. That's
yeah, you guys could take your time, and I can think about it too.
Say it one more time.
Sure, yeah. So, yeah, the basic question is, what is some advice you received, in your journey that did not turn out to be as valuable as it was presented, or did not, wasn't as relevant to your particular path?
Oh, actually, I do have it. It actually was recent advice.
Oh, really?
Okay. It was unsolicited recent advice. Unsolicited
the best.
Always, yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm like, thank you.
Thanks. You don't know me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I knew the people, but like, and it was interesting. No, I actually had like a kind of a group of friends that they were supposed to have like a girls' weekend. For context, we have a girls' weekend. I couldn't go at the end because my family came to New York, and so I decided to stay with my family. But we had like a FaceTime, or like, with everyone, and they were all together. And then I was, here in New York, and they were like, "Yeah, Ariana, like, we're kind of worried about you. Like, it just seems that like you, number one, they were like, we don't think New York is good for you." I was like, okay. And then they were like, we think that like you should take a job that like isn't trying to like is it in the like social impact world, basically. Wow. Like, we think that like, because they were just thinking, because they were like,
show them this podcast.
Yeah, well, then they were like, they were coming, it was interesting because I knew where they were coming from, but I just was like, fuck out of here. But like, they basically, I just kind of like let them talk about it, but it came like, the underlying point was like, I care too much. Like I joke, like I call myself a crippling empath, because like I do get literally crippled and like paralyzed by how much I feel about like around people and like how much I care about issues. And so I think their thinking was like, oh, you need to just like have a regular job that isn't trying to like save the world. And I just was like, no, like that, like you obviously like don't know. And it was actually very interesting. Like I've had a lot of like friendships. I think COVID and in the past year, George Floyd, all this different stuff has shaken up a lot of relationships with people. And I think I'm starting to kind of see these things where like, it felt to me, I was like, you just don't see me. Like if you're proposing this, then like, you just actually don't really know me. And like, that is just very misplaced advice. And like, I will not be taking it, you know, cause it just was like, like, it was that, that was a piece that I think, cause I don't think in college or anything, people gave me that much advice. I think people were very encouraging, like, oh, you have so much potential or like opportunity, or you could be so great, but like, they never said like, do this or don't do this. Like I also never had parents that said like, oh, you must be an engineer or like whatever. Like I was first to go to college, my family, and they were kind of like, do what you want to do. And I kind of wish maybe they had given some advice, but more like maybe I should have taken like a finance course, like an Excel course. But like, I think that piece of advice I got recently was really, I was just like, I'm just going to leave that. We're not gonna consider that. Thank you though. So that's fine.
Nah, they was trying to conform you to make you more convenient for their like.
Yeah, like sorry you don't like me posting on Insta all the time. Like unfollow me if you're uncomfortable. Like that I'm constantly calling you out for not doing anything and like being fucking full of yourself. Like you know, like it's like which I mean I had that issue last year, you know, like and people are just like, Ariana, like maybe you should like stop watching the news. I'm like, maybe you should fucking care more. You know, like I don't like, and of course, like let me figure out for me like what is most healthy. Like I know my body, I know myself, and so like, you know, it's kind of like what if it's like if you're not, there's like this slogan that's like if you're not angry, you're not paying attention or something. I've been feeling that a lot lately, where I'm just like, my caring is actually not. It shouldn't be the exception. You know, and also like, but then on the flip side, I have friends who are like, we love how much you feel deeply and we are learning to care more because of how much you care. And I'm like, okay, that's more the side that I kind of want to be on, as opposed to like, oh, for your own well-being, we think you should just like care less. I'm like,
let me do self-care for you. And
yeah. It's like, okay, bitch, I do a face mask. Don't you worry. I get my 8 hours of sleep. Like, you know, and it was weird, but okay, I'll pause.
No, it's funny is because when you said it, it's almost like who got it wrong when they was trying to tell you what to do, like how I almost interpreted it. And I'm glad, Ariana, you had a like piece of advice similar or a story similar, because mine's is like similar to that. Like you like grew up, you know, talented, didn't have, everyone always expected success and all this kind of stuff, but not in the space that I'm going into. And, you know, it was like, of course he's going to play sports and be great. Of course he's going to be a leader and all these other things, but not that Silicon Valley shit. And that's kind of like the advice that I got. So when, I won't mention any names, but, you know, I won't even give any context because I don't like whatever. But there was a person who's supposed to like give advice on like to entrepreneurs and help them, you know, there's, you know how this shit works. Like you go to organizations and incubators, all these different things with your ideas and all this kind of stuff. And I was told, again, this is like when I first learned about like Silicon Valley, like the word entrepreneurship, startups. I was like 23, 24. Well, I guess I don't have, I'm like 32 now. But it wasn't too long ago, and I was like kind of too old to just now be hearing about that shit. So I was like super excited. And when I go there and it's like, this is the idea, I was literally told, you're shoveling horse shit looking for gold.
Whoa.
Yeah. I was told that. I was told that. Like, I was told that.
Yep.
And that wasn't by like just a random person. That was by like the person.
And they think it's a compliment. Wow. They think that they're helping you by saying it, right? Like,
well, they did, because, you know, it's funny because I was talking to Julie about this yesterday about, you know, we talk about like perseverance and you know, all this kind of stuff. Even then, because again, once you have the vision internally, well, motherfucker, you don't see what I see. So of course you know what I'm saying? But
Right.
when he said that, I told him, I was like, man, that's funny you say that, but like, you will see from me, you will hear from me again. This is like maybe like 6, 7, 8 years ago. And here we are, you know, federally funded, all this stuff that like, I guess I found the fucking gold dealing with all this shit, right? So that's like what it comes down to is like, you will get that, you know, and I don't, you know, I fuck with my parents. Like, I love them to death. Like, great relationship. But they know they, like, disowned me for, like, a year or two when I dropped out of school. So I call them out on that, though. Like, you even got to be willing to, like, fuck y'all then. Y'all feel that way. I'm still going to do this thing. Like, you know, no disrespect or anything like that. But, yeah, man, the expectation was you're supposed to finish school, get a degree. You promised us all of the, you know, all of these things. And it's like, I did, but something way more important that literally does. It's almost as if I can't continue school because of doing this thing. So you even have to, like, sometimes your parents and, like, their lack of knowledge at the time, you know what I'm saying? They may give you advice that doesn't align with, like, the future, you know, where you're supposed to be. So, like, that's my thing. It's like, it can even come from, like,
parents are
close
people
ones.
too. You know?
Yeah, of course, especially dealing with the environment that they dealt with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's no disrespect to them.
Yeah, and they're not gods, though. They're not like all knowing.
Yeah.
No, 100%. Like I tell people all the time, your parents can only teach you what they knew. What was they doing? I mean, what were they doing? That's what they taught you. Like, and if you're not trying to do what they were doing, then you got to go learn something else.
Yeah. No, that's definitely something you sort of do as you, like, you know, go through in your coming of age process. That's hopefully how you understand. You can empathize with your parents more. See, you know, I was very fortunate that both my parents, like, you know, kind of let me make mistakes within, you know, certain constraints. So I was able to learn some of those things, and it's easier to internalize when it's like lived experience. Sometimes it's hard to take things at face value, especially when you don't have the context. But that's one thing that, like, I'm glad you brought that up, Ariana, too, is that, like, yeah, they're real people too. They make mistakes. They're not perfect. They're just doing the best they can for you. Which is
especially when you're trying to deal in blockchain, bro. Like, who parents gonna understand fucking blockchain? Like I tried to explain this to my mom, and she got concerned for me. Like, that shit sounds dangerous. What you're doing? I was like, kinda, sort of. But no, 100%. If it's like a different paradigm, you can't expect them to understand it. It might even like have them think you're crazy.
Right. And it's a two-way street. I'll share a couple things. That I also, you know, thought was like more like common knowledge or like advice that was given to me. Mine aren't as there's stuff I received, but it's not like super like personal that no one told me, like, you know, you shouldn't live your life like this, which definitely been told that before. But one of them was a recent post by, I think her name's Mary Beach. I saw it on Instagram, but it was also from Twitter. But just a different sort of way to look at privilege. And I know I've talked to JoAdel about this. They do like the privilege walk when you guys had that, and I think that also exemplifies sort of this point. But is that a lot of people think of privilege as like bonus points. It's like, oh, you have privilege, so you have these extra things that like can get you, you know, more opportunities, more whatever. But really, a better conceptualization of it is that it's that there's a lack of obstacles to do what you want to do. So it's not like bonus points. It's like, no, you just don't have these obstacles. You don't have these hindrances. And that's why it's super hard to explain it to some people about, you know, like, hey, you're privileged. Like, and you're like, hey, what do you mean? I like fought for this. I worked hard. It's like, yeah, you worked hard and you got what you deserved, right? There's tons of people out there who work hard, but due to, you know, other circumstances, they don't necessarily get what they deserve. So I think that was a big thing recently, you know, that I really liked. And she made an analogy, a sports analogy. It's like for a basketball game or any game where it's refereed. It's like, oh, the ref keeps calling fouls on the other team. It's like, yeah, you're not going to talk to the ref and be like, hey, can you call some fouls on us? It's like, no, you're just going to like keep on trying to win the game. But then once you realize, like, oh, there is sort of this inequity, there is sort of an imbalance in how, you know, this game of life is being reffed. What you do with, you know, your lack of obstacles is you try to, you know, help people to achieve, you know, what they deserve to achieve based on, you know, what they've been doing. So I think that was, like, for me, a really nice way to sort of, like, visualize that and think about privilege. And then the last thing is something that definitely has like some biblical roots and definitely like ancient wisdom maybe, but like the golden rule, which I think I dislike, is basically just like treat others as you want to be treated. And I think it's like, no, you shouldn't treat people as you want to be treated, because everyone's like a unique person with their own preferences of how they would like to be, you know, like interacted with. So you should treat other people as they want to be treated, or as they should be treated. And I think that like distinction definitely gets lost, especially early on. Is that like, oh yeah, I'm just going to treat you like I don't want to be treated. It's like, well, we have different histories, we have different pain points, we have different things that we're like more sensitive to and different perspectives. So like if I was going to treat you like I want to be treated, you may not like that at all. But if I want to like understand you and like learn about you and then treat you as you want to be treated, then we can, you know, have a more harmonious sort of like relationship and stuff like that. So those were mine. I'm sorry I was like kind of two, but yeah, that's those are my two sort of like common advice
like
I
those.
think. Yeah. Yeah. Feel free to build on it, take it wherever. But okay, yeah, just gonna wrap this up. I really appreciate both of you guys. I definitely learned a lot about each of you guys and both of your experiences, and you know, different technologies and tons of stuff that I'm definitely gonna like. It's gonna simmer in my subconscious for a while as I like, you know, sort it out. But it was super valuable for me, and I hope you guys also had some, you know, value you got from this conversation. And definitely, please, you know, keep in touch, keep on doing what you're doing. Definitely support whatever you guys do. And yeah, just super appreciative and grateful for both of you guys.
Same. This was great. I feel inspired, which is rare. So thank you both.
No, this was great. It was great. I too feel inspired. I tend to chase that feeling a lot, though. I will say, Ariana, if possible, I would love to connect with you like offline. Definitely would like to learn more about your work, Audacious Project, and other stuff like that. Definitely sound like that's the one thing I'm not so good at. Thank you.
And then you can also
I'm not
LinkedIn.
the best person when it comes to like responding in the chat, but got your email, save it in a note.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
Kai, thanks for setting this up, man. This was like really good.
Yeah, no problem. I couldn't imagine it going better. That was great.
A good season 2 opener.
Yeah, season 2 opener. I mean, we should just end it there too. I don't know if
I think.
Right.
Cool. Well,
right,
y'all have a great rest of your Saturday.
You too.
Yeah. Thanks, you as well.
Bye.
All right. Later.
See ya.